You know, the city is full of happy accidents. The city is where this runs into that and magical things happen.
Cities are
a great place to live.
Creative.
Everyone mixing together.
Happy.
Fun.
Frustrating.
Filled with energy.
Magic.
America has always had a love-hate relationship with cities. Yet over 80% of us live in urban centers, a number expected to reach 90% by the year 2050.
People are moving to cities to have a better chance for themselves, for their kids, for education, for health, to connect, to be together.
In a city, there's a sense of a public realm, of public places, of a sense that we all own this together, we're all in this together.
Saving the City is a lively and provocative television series celebrating the energy and excitement of our cities by telling stories through the eyes of people who use the city. We meet those who help shape our cities, from planners and politicians to ordinary citizens and keen observers of the urban scene. We look at what works and what doesn't, and how people forge coalitions to further their goals. One story about people coalescing for the common good is in Minneapolis, where an architect, an historian, and a mayor worked together to remake the rundown riverfront.
Here we are on the Mississippi River, on the only major falls on the river, with a great story to tell. I mean, who can miss with that?
So I came to the university in 1966. A couple years later, my friends and I discovered the Central Riverfront. To us, it was a terrific playground. It seemed to be absolutely full of potential.
As an architecture student, Tom's graduate thesis envisioned a riverfront museum that would celebrate Minneapolis's Milltown roots.
Well, one of the things that we knew about the city of Minneapolis was that it had a rich history right here along the riverfront. The birthplace of the city is this riverfront.
Minneapolis was the milling capital of the world in the 1880s. By 1930s, that had ended. Milling had gone elsewhere because they no longer needed water power to do milling.
So the industrial riverfront began decades of decline. Mayor Sharon Sales Belton wanted to change all that.
We assembled a group of all the stakeholders and said, let's get together, let's collaborate, and let's use this as a catalyst for restoring the riverfront. The project is a grand vision. And with every grand vision, guess what happens? Tragedy.
Flames from the fire dominated the skyline last night, and with it, Minneapolis lost a piece of skyline that had been a part of it for more than a century.
I'm sitting at my desk in my office, and somebody calls and says, there's a fire down at the mill.
I panicked. I just was terribly depressed.
By the time it was out, the fire was contained to just one building, but it was obvious that there was little to be salvaged.
The fire burned overnight, and it wasn't till the next morning when I realized that there was something left that we needed to somehow move in and preserve what remained.
Tom Meyer, now a practicing architect, was tapped to rebuild the burned-out mill.
It was just a shell, it was dangerous, and we went to the city and said, even though it's ruined, it may even be more developable now.
So Tom designed a glass box to be dropped within the walls of the ruins. It would house the Mill City Museum, the one he had envisioned over 2 decades earlier.
And what we have is essentially a freight elevator in which you ride through all the floors of the museum.
For half a century, Minneapolis milled more flour than any other place in the world.
And you actually have a sense that the mill has come back to life.
The Mill City Museum paved the way for an arts corridor along the riverfront, anchored by the famed Guthrie Theater.
this was a golden opportunity. It was a golden opportunity for us, but we also believed a golden opportunity to put the focus back down here by the river.
Designed by French architect Jean Nouvel, the Guthrie makes a bold architectural statement.
Jean Nouvel had the eccentric notion that we should build the theatres 50 feet in the air and that we should build this cantilever right out almost over the river. And he used to say in that wonderful French accent, the Mississippi is America.
And when Guthrie made that decision, that absolutely cemented this as an essential part of the city.
We thought and knew that we would be able to get past our differences and that we would come together for the greater good, for the good of the community. We believed in ourselves, and we got this done.
There's something new and exciting in the Betty Crocker kitchens. And here's Betty Crocker herself.
Yet, not every endeavor turns out Betty Crocker perfect. For every popular urban space, we're still creating places that are overscaled, hostile to pedestrians, and monuments to mediocrity.
When we get it wrong, cities can be terrible places. And the challenge for us as architects, as planners, as urbanists is how do we get it right and what went wrong and what can we learn from both the successes and failures.
Conceived as more than purely a television series, Saving the City is a huge public education endeavor, highlighting successful and unsuccessful examples of urban development throughout the United States and Canada. By comparing and contrasting experiences in different cities, we aim to raise awareness about why cities are important, why we should care about their vitality, and how to make our cities into more desirable places. One issue affecting the vibrancy of even the most successful cities is how to attract families with children to the urban core and how to keep them in town when their kids reach school age. This is a tale of two cities, two of North America's favorite cities, Vancouver and San Francisco. Both announced plans to create vital new neighborhoods on former rail yards at the water's edge, along False Creek in Vancouver, and in Mission Bay in San Francisco. Yet only one has succeeded in attracting and keeping families with children in the urban core.
As far as the city of Vancouver, going right back to the 1970s, we had a reform council and they decided that we wanted families with children in the city. So it was very much a public policy objective.
From the beginning, we said there needed to be a clustering of community facilities at the heart of that new neighborhood that we were designing. So that meant a community center, childcare, and the school.
I can remember when we had the public meetings about the design of the Elsie Royce School, and all these families with children showed up. I was just amazed. It became very apparent that the school was going to be full the moment it opened.
It is never too early to start planning for a school. It's the absolute bedrock of building healthy society.
But that's not what happened in San Francisco's Mission Bay. Despite land being given to the school district, no school has been built, and separate playgrounds and a Little League park remain fields of dreams.
Okay, bye.
Your mommy, kiss goodbye.
Mwah. Have a good day.
That leaves Mission Bay families like the Wallaces with limited neighborhood options and a grinding commute to get their kids to school.
Mission Bay was just being built out, and there was a lot of talk around the mayor wanting to create a neighborhood in the city that was very kid and family friendly. One of the things they said in this neighborhood, there would be a school just within blocks. The school has not come to fruition.
The only public space built that serves Mission Bay families is the local library, where story times would draw up to 140 people in a room meant to hold 55. The fire department had to be called in to limit attendance.
I saw a green duck. We have to turn people away. If we had story times all day long, 7 days a week, I don't think that we would still meet the demand.
Parents in Vancouver, like Melanie Osmak, have had a very different experience. They wouldn't live anywhere else.
We can walk everywhere. We don't waste 3 hours of our day sitting in traffic. We've got a lot of parks. I mean, if you look out my window, you can see 3 of them just from my window. There's 5 parks we can get to in less than 10 minutes.
It's a good place for family and for having kids. It's such a great community to be around. There's all these programs that are out there that you can do during the day.
Most of those programs are run out of an old railroad roundhouse, which was transformed into a thriving community center.
The roundhouse is like our rec room, because we do live in smaller spaces, and you can find everything there from, your painting classes to your dance classes to your hockey programs. And it's right by our school, so they actually do a lot of lunch hour programs for our school-age children as well.
This is where many cities fail. They forget that it's about the school, that it's about the things that happen in the community center that would be supportive of that child.
While Vancouver now has thousands of school-aged children living in and around its downtown, San Francisco continues to struggle to attract and retain families.
Most of the kids that Sarah has grown up with in this neighborhood have all left. Personally, I'd like my daughter to grow up in the city. I feel like there's so much the city has to offer her in terms of culture and the diversity.
Even with all the city had to offer, it wasn't enough to keep the Wallaces in town. They've since moved across San Francisco Bay to suburban Pleasanton.
If the education problem was solved, we'd still be here. We wouldn't be leaving.
And we should be planning and designing our cities so that children are not only tolerated, they are welcomed, they are encouraged, and it's a rich, exciting place for a kid to grow up.
Why not meet the challenge of a growing area where everything is carefully planned from the beginning, with parks and recreational areas, schools, churches, shopping centers, and broad curving streets for delightful residential living.
Saving the city begins with a look back in time.
Downtown was once absolutely necessary. It was the only place most people would go to work and the only place most people would go to shop. That's where everything was, it's where everything came together.
After gaining an understanding of how our cities have evolved, the programs are arranged by subject, not city, as we explore topics such as housing.
Living in a community mixed in age, as well as race and gender and orientation and place of origin, all of those things really, really matter to giving a richness to our lives.
Food.
Food has been crucial to environment and making environment whole since man first dragged a beast back into the cave and put a picture of it up on the wall.
Performing and visual arts.
Cities historically have been places where people created culture as well as consumed culture, and they still are.
Transportation.
Great cities can only thrive, especially as they attain greater densities, if there's transportation choices that are available to everyone to move around.
And parks.
To be successful, a city really has to understand how to integrate nature and the built city.
One such success story is that of New York's High Line, where a pair of ordinary citizens spurred the movement that resulted in the extraordinary green space threading its way through the asphalt jungle.
High Line has always been a story about David and Goliath, and it's been a constant battle.
Sometimes you see the world in a fresher and better way when you're a little bit outside of a field.
A journalist once referred to Robert and I in an article as a pair of neighborhood nobodies. We weren't architects, we weren't landscape people, we weren't politicians, but we were New Yorkers who knew our neighborhood, and when we saw an opportunity that was being wasted, we stepped forward and said, let's try and do something with it.
Most people, they looked at us, two guys with no experience, in anything related, and said, well, how would you guys do it? The High Line, when we came upon it, was an old elevated rail line, but originally the trains used to run down 10th Avenue, and 10th Avenue was known as Death Avenue because so many people were run over by the trains that they elevated it and created this elevated train track in the 1930s. And it served the industrial side of this western part of Manhattan, which was a lot of factories and warehouses, and brought in a lot of food to New York. The High Line was nicknamed the Lifeline of New York.
The last train ran on the High Line in 1980, and after that it fell into disuse.
It was a derelict railroad with a lot of rats living on it and weeds and trees.
This thing was viewed as a dark, dank liability, something that needed to be pulled down.
Looking at the crowds enjoying the High Line today, it is hard to imagine the many obstacles that Josh and Robert had to overcome.
There was tremendous opposition from property owners. That was the most vehement opposition. They wanted the High Line down.
There were endless questions that seemed unanswerable. How do you deal with the underlying property owners and make them whole? How do you actually get people up there? Will people use it? I think both of us thought the chances of it happening were very, very, very low.
It can get so daunting, or how are you going to raise millions of dollars and get all these public approvals? It's easier to just look, what's the next incremental step that we can take that will be success?
There were a lot of key turning points. We mounted a lawsuit to stop the demolition of the High Line, which we won. I think the second really big milestone was when the Bloomberg administration announced at the end of 2002 that they were in support of the project.
They believed that if we made the High Line into something extraordinary, it would actually catalyze economic development around it, and indeed it has.
So the economic impact of investing in public open space is a key lesson for cities around the world. Build the public space first, private investment will follow. It really works.
From the team that brought you the award-winning Saving the Bay National PBS series comes this exciting and timely set of programs that explores how to remake our cities into better places.
Cities are finally shaped by consumer demand, by what average people want, not architects and landscape architects and public officials, but citizens. Then it becomes urgent to you to make sure that they are demanding very good things.
Cities are made for people to be together, and that's what fosters innovation, and that's why we have to make cities great, and we have to make cities survive and thrive.
After watching Saving the City, you'll never look at cities the same way again. Please help support production of Saving the City. To learn more, visit savingthecity.org.